Okay, let's do another example. And in this example, we're going to talk about roofing. Okay, so if you've ever shingled a roof, it's hard when you do it by hand without a gun, when you're doing it with a hammer like I did. So shingles come in what we call squares. Okay, and so again, I'm not going to get into all that, but that's what this example is about. It is about shingling a roof. So we need to figure out the area of the roof so we know how many shingles to buy to cover the entire roof. So again, I'm going to read the problem. I'm not going to write it all out, and I want you to write down the information that is given in the problem, whatever formulas, and draw a picture. And I will do the same and see how close we come. Now it says asphalt roofing shingles are sold in bundles. The number of bundles needed to cover a square. Now again, a square is considered 100 square feet. That's what we call a square when it comes to shingles. So you'll hear people in roofing will say how many squares are used. Each square is 100 square feet of roof. Okay, and so that's usually how they're bundled when you buy the shingles at Menards or wherever. Okay, so it says the number of bundles needed to cover a square depends on the overlap when the shingles are installed. If the overlap allows 4 inches of each shingle to be exposed, then 4 bundles are needed per square. With a 5-inch exposure, 3.2 bundles are needed per square. Okay? It says figure the number of bundles for a 4-inch exposure and for a 5-inch exposure for a roof measuring 30 feet by 20 feet. Okay, so let's do this. So let's draw a picture. So let's say our roof measures 20 feet by 30 feet, right? That's what they said. Let me double check. Yeah, 30 by 20. And so let's figure out the area we need to cover, right? We need to figure out the area. So the area of the roof, again, length times width. So it's going to be 30 times 20. And so that's going to be 600 square feet. Okay? So now we need to figure out how many squares do we need to cover this area? How many squares of shingles do we need to cover this area if we're going to allow a 5-inch exposure and then also a 4-inch exposure? Okay. So now let's start with the squares. Okay, so again, what's a square? So number of squares, each square is 100 square feet. Well, guess what? So we're just going to divide this by 100 square feet. So the number of squares is going to be 600 divided by 100, right? Square feet, right? And so the number of squares, the units drop out, so the number of squares is 6. So we're going to need 6 squares. Okay? Now we're going to need to find out bundles. Now the bundles depends on the exposure you need, right? So it says in the problem that with 5-inch exposure it's 3.2 bundles per square, and for 4-inch overlaps or 4-inch exposure it's 4 bundles. Okay, so for 4-inch exposure, right? So if we're doing 4-inch exposure, it's 4 bundles per square. If it's 5-inch, it's 3.2 bundles per square. Okay, so all we're going to do is, since we've got 6 squares that we need to cover, how many bundles do we need to buy if we're going to do 4-inch exposure? Well, it's going to be 4 bundles per square, so we're going to multiply. So in this case here, it's going to be 4 times 6. We need 6 squares. It's going to be 4 bundles per square, so we're going to need to buy 24 bundles of shingles to cover the 6 squares with 4-inch exposure. Now, if it's 5-inch exposure we want, then we need less shingles, right? Because we have more that we're less overlap. Okay, so that means it's going to be 3.2 bundles per square times 6 squares, and that's going to lead us to what? That's going to be 19.2 bundles. And so in this case here, you'd end up with 20 bundles because you don't buy a fraction of a bundle. So in this case, technically, you'd be 20 bundles. So you would need 20 bundles for if you want 5-inch exposure, and it'd be 24 bundles if you want 4-inch exposure. And that's the end of it. We're done. Have a great day.